That's what I say, but like that's how I sorted out my. I'm a licensed provider.
Right.
I'm kind of a subcontractor.
So the licensed provider could have another site, but that doesn't necessarily mean you could have.
No,
another
I
site.
cannot.
Okay.
No, because I'm not a provider. Yeah, good question.
Mm-hmm.
So the next one here, limited scope licensure. This is probably one of my favorite and I think the best kept secret in our state for families who are wanting to figure something out on their own. So limited scope licensure means that you will, just like it says, it's a limited scope. It means you'll serve 1 to 2 people, no more than 2 people in a residential setting. So it could be your son or daughter and their friend from school in an apartment, in a house, and you have to still set up as a licensed provider, but you do this limited scope licensure, and then you essentially are the provider. You hire staff, you have to do everything to make sure that all the needs are met, but you have a lot more, what would I say, control, because you hire all the people, right? You train all the people. So you have much more oversight and control over what's going on in that apartment or house for your loved one than, let's say, a full licensed provider, if that makes any sense. I know several families who have chosen this option and they buy a house or an apartment and they get licensed. It's a lot of hoops to jump through and the paperwork is kind of scary. And on the first slide, one of the hyperlinks to the paid ads folks is the actual checklist of what you need to do. The other reason I put Article 63 up there, yeah, the checklist, it looks horrifying, but it's really not. Like, we have started our policies and procedures because you have to make a policy and procedure manual and you have to do some of those things. And your policies and procedures have to align with that big Bible, Article 63. But it's not nearly as scary as it seems, probably. And there are folks that do limited scope licensure that you can consult with. I don't know how much they charge to do it, but I know that there are people that you can consult with that have went through the process. I'll consult with you for free because I kind of know how you go through the processes. Anyway, but there are people that are currently doing it that can also help. And the CDDOs are usually really fantastic about helping people because everybody in the state that works in the field knows that we have like a super capacity crisis happening. And so the more licensed providers and services options there are, the happier. So all community settings are subject to this thing called HCBS final rule. I don't know if anybody heard of final rule. So I came out from the Center for Medicaid and Medicare in 2014. I was like, man, that's like almost 8 years old. And we're just now implementing it in Kansas. But basically the gist of that rule is that you can take people out of institutions and you can put them in the community and still really be an institution. And so they want to make sure that people have choices, that if people do live in full residential license places, that Sam and Joe aren't just stuck in this same house because so that a lot of the final rule settings have to do about making sure people are having choice, making sure that we haven't made little institutions in the community and that people are involved in their communities. And then that's the link to the final rule information. My nice banner over here. Okay, so there are 2 different types of intermediate care facilities, and they're public and private. So the 2 that you may have heard of public are Parsons State Hospital and Kansas Neurologic Institution in Topeka. There are also private, and I'm going to talk just a little bit about that. So intermediate care facilities, this is their regulations and the links that go with them. So ICF IEDs do not fall under HCBS. So they're not considered a home and community-based service because it's an institution. And so the funding for these places come out of what's called state general funds. That's probably way too much more information than you want. But anyway, so if you want to go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit. So Parsons, it's for individuals with IDD and behavioral needs. So a lot of people there have higher behavioral needs, and they also have what's called the sexual offenders unit. Parsons also does some outreach to help with behavioral, helping people with behavioral needs to help try to keep people out of institutions. So that's a link if you want more information about Parsons. Again, to get into Parsons, you have to show the state that you've exhausted your community resources and that this is the best option for the treatment needs of your loved one. And you have to go through what's called the gatekeeping process.
And where is this located?
Parsons is in Parsons, Kansas.
Oh, okay.
I know this is the easiest one to remember. I was like, where's Parsons? But it's south, right?
Southeast.
Southeast,
Yeah.
Southeast
Yeah.
Kansas. All right, the next slide is Kansas Neurologic Institute. Historically, K&I has really been for people with
Mama.
another mama. Came in. He calls everybody mama, so even the dads, he usually says mama and mine's dad. So
Mama.
anyway, historically, K&I has been for people with more medically and developmentally complex needs. So like my youngest daughter, Jake. So it has over the past several years been changing a little, and they have been taking more and more people with some behavioral needs because of lack of capacity in our state. I'm being recorded, so I don't know if I should say this out loud, but I know this really cute guy that works at K9. He's their nurse practitioner. Anyway, so
There you go.
so my husband, it's really funny because when you first started working there, you would have some parents, and we're parents, so we get it. We get how frustrating it is and how angry you can become, and you would have people that would say, well, you just don't understand what it's like, and maybe. So anyway, it's kind of cute. So anyway, but the same with K9. In order to get into K9, there has to be a gatekeeping process in order for a person to be admitted into K9. All right, so then all I know is there are private ICFs. I think there are 12. And all I can tell you is if you click on that link, it will tell you the list. So if you are interested in checking out one of those private ICFs, it would still go through the gatekeeping process, but there is a list of facilities that do private ICF on that website. I don't have them all memorized. Okay, so that's it. Like I didn't have much for you, but that's kind of the options that are currently available. So I want to ask your questions, and then I want to spend some time, if you will, talking about you guys' thoughts. Like, what do we need? But anyway, first question. Let me ask you a question.
So the private ICF, does that mean that you private pay?
No, it just means the providers are not state run. They're just like a residential provider can go to the state and get a license. So this was one specific question I asked the licensing people. I said, are you still licensing private ICF? And they said yes. They're not frowning upon it. They did say, everything has to be HCBS final rule, but people still get choice, right? And so you have to show you've exhausted community resources and that's the best community option, but people do have choice. So a private ICF just means that maybe Dan and I would just decide to open a private ICF. We would have to go through the licensing and open that, but it's not a state-run facility. It's just run by private people, just like
But they're still getting Medicaid funding for the individuals that are there.
so they don't. So families don't pay, but it's state general funds. So they would still get. So the facility gets what's called state general funds, but the person would still qualify for an IDD waiver, and they would still have like a residential.
So what's an example of, do you have any examples of the private?
Like where they are. Or who
So
they are.
is Mosaic an example of?
No,
private?
they're a regular.
Do you want to go back?
Oh yeah,
to
let me go
this?
back because I
Yeah,
can.
I mean, yeah.
No, let me find one because I'm not very familiar with all of
And then you
them.
want to go,
Yeah, I'm gonna open the link. How about that?
yeah.
Well, maybe if I can see what I'm doing.
Um,
It might not let me open it from PowerPoint
yeah,
view.
you might need to exit.
Okay, hold on. We can get out of here. Maybe I can get out of my PowerPoint.
Uh-huh. Yeah, if it's in this view, it's usually.
There we go. Okay, so let me just do that and click on the link this way. Open link. Let's see if it works like magic. I don't know.
It's on the other one. There we go.
Did it open? There you go. Okay, so this is a list of the private ICFs in Kansas. So there's several in Lawrence, it looks like, Emporia, Douglas, lots in Lawrence. Lawrence is loaded with them. There's one at Overland Park. What's it called? Grandview Lane. Does anybody know what that is?
What is it?
It's called Grandview Lane. Overland Park. Jackson. Yeah, so here's the facilities, Miami and Hiawatha. So that's it. That's all of the ICF, private ICFs in Kansas. So they haven't, they don't like, because the trend is to move away from institutional settings. I don't think that they're like advertising that they still take application, but they are. So yeah, that is a list of them.
I have a question just because I grew up in Topeka and I know of it, but I
You
don't
look
know.
familiar
if
to
they're
me.
Classified, TARC,
Yeah,
how are they classified?
so they're a day service provider.
Day.
Yeah, they are day only. Yep. You look familiar, and I think I know you. I'm gonna figure that out before the end of the night. I'm like, well, I think I know you, especially if you're
I
from
thought
Topeka.
the same. but
Yeah.
I haven't figured it out.
What's your name?
Kim.
Kim who? Kim who?
Yeah, used to be Sykes.
Kim Sites.
Becker Lassen Insurance, we have to use them. That's my sister that runs that. in Topeka.
Oh, I'm gonna figure it out. Okay, sorry. Well, I'll get back to you on that because I know you. Okay, what other questions? I'm gonna just sit here. Do people have?
Is everybody familiar with the gateway thing? Because I would have had a question about the gateway.
I'm just assuming it's a questionnaire that you have to fill out and make sure you're checking all the right boxes.
Well, it's a little more than that. It is, let me go up here. I think it's on the slide. It is basically the checks and balances to make sure that we're not unduly putting people in institutions that we have exhausted that. So you have to talk about, okay, so here is the link. And if you,
So if your kid gets kicked out of every single day program.
yeah, or residential, yeah, that's basically it. So there you go. Here is the policy, the ICF. And if you notice the ICF IID, and I was like, that's a typo, but I was schooled on Friday by the person, somebody at the state I met with, that it stands for individual with intellectual disabilities, because the ICF are geared toward individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. No, intellectual disabilities, not the developmental piece. And so I can open this application, see what happens. Oh, wait, maybe we just want to look at the policy. Hold on, let me open that. This is pretty cool being able to show it up here. Okay. So establishes, oh, don't do that. Criteria and procedures for admissions and transfers to, as well as discharge from public and private ICFs. So yeah, it's a collaboration with the CDDO and your MCO, and everybody has to kind of say what happened and like why, what you've tried, and the CDDO and MCO are responsible for collaborating to complete the application, supporting documents to submit to KDADS. So your CDO and your MCO should be helping with this. And I'm going to guess if you've been having lots of different placement issues, they're probably really involved with you anyway, right? So there's that. I like that. Just a few.
3, 4.
Or 5. Yeah, I get it.
4, 3, just 3.
I get it.
It looked like a lot of those that were on your list, Kathy, that just listed a house name are run by CLO.
That could be.
If you click on the link, then it tells you the owner.
Okay, so there you have it.
Who is it that they're looking at?
Community living opportunities.
In
CLO.
Lawrence, that
And the
must
one
be-
in the Overland Park.
Just changed their name.
The good
The
life.
Good Life.
The Good Life. Yeah, that makes it, that probably makes sense why there's so many in Lawrence. Okay, that is why. Aha. What other questions? I don't know if this is helpful information.
So you mentioned you're a provider and a parent to two kids in the same house, or
Yeah.
how is, so, and how that was different as being the parent and provider. Can you
Yeah.
talk more about how that works?
Yeah, okay, so Mr. Jacob here, because we adopted him. So the only, like, obviously he needs 24-hour support, but I don't know about any of you, and this is just me. There is no provider in my county that I'm sending him to for residential living. I like to keep him alive. And he's just not going anywhere. So our options is for day service and then for personal care attendants. So there is a program in Topeka and through TARC, which is one program I continue to tell the state, you have to expand this program because every parent needs this option. So with self-determination, I'm able to do day service with Jacob. So I work with Jacob during the day, so he gets 25 hours of day service. So I do 15 hours a week with Jacob. My daughter, who's 19, does 13 hours with Jake. I know that's more than 25, but somehow that works out for them. Anyway, and so he gets to do things he wants to do. If he wants to go to a Royals game on Friday night, that's day service. So day service doesn't have to be between 9 and 2:30, because this is what we say day service is. Day service is a broad definition of he's out in the community doing things he wants to do, volunteering his jobs, volunteering at the church, things like that. And we just support him in that. Now, in order to be a paid parent, every year since he's turned 18, I have to go to the court with his guardianship report and say, we have mitigated conflict of interest. It is difficult to find staffing for Jacob for numerous reasons, and we've mitigated all conflicts of interest. And so that's what I'm able to do with Jacob. It's through this program called Self-Determination Day Service, and then we use like Life Patterns, which is an FMS provider. Probably a lot of you have helpers here, maybe, that we use to do his basically residential / PCA services. So for Jesse, who's not related to us, we're able to do day and residential for him. And so we provide all of his supports for day and res. So we're able to build through self-determination, day and residential. The good thing, and the reason why I'm encouraging the state to do this, is that TARC is very good because they take, I'll say 20%, even though I think that's on the high end. I think they might take between 15 and 18% administration. So they take an administrative cost because they do the payroll, they pay, they do all the tax stuff. But then whatever's left from that, so that, you know, we all know there's a daily rate for day, daily rate for res. So what's ever left after their administrative is what is Jesse's budget. And then I can decide, so I can pay my workers more than $10.50 an hour. So it's real easy for me to find people, or it is a lot easier, shouldn't say real easy. It is a lot easier for me to find workers for Jesse because I can pay them more. But it is much more difficult for me to find workers for Jacob at $10.50 an hour.
And I'm just gonna, how do you, I don't want to say get away with being able to do that, because all the instructions that any of us have ever been is that you cannot supplement their income.
Okay, you're right. It's because it's like all of the providers. So Mosaic can choose how much they pay their workers.
Mhm.
They get this reimbursement rate from the state, but they can choose how much they pay their workers.
Okay.
And so they probably keep a higher admin rate. And then okay, so this is the best example I can give you. My daughter's on the TA waiver. She gets specialized medical care. So the state reimbursement rate was $32 an hour for the longest time. Last July, we just did a lot of advocacy work and we got that raised to $43 an hour. So those nursing agencies, they get the whole 43, and then they get to decide how much they're going to pay their nurses. So it's kind of the same for self-determination. Since I'm looked at like a provider, we get the whole rate. And so basically what's happening is I'm not keeping any more than Tarp's keeping, like I want it to go to my people. And so that's how, so there is advantages when I talk about limited licensure, because you can also do that. There's nothing to say if you're a residential and day provider, you can't pay your people more money.
Okay.
You would make less money, right? But for the providers, I mean, they're trying to make a living. So,
Thank you.
and I will say one more thing further about that. And I definitely have been talking about this. So for the shared living providers, ooh, I'm being recorded. Okay. So nice. So for the shared living providers, huh?
Mute.
So for those providers, so when we started trying to figure out what are we going to do, because like Jesse came to us from Lake Mary, he has not been rehospitalized since. Huge victory for him. His family is like, woo, don't ever kick him out. But when he started to get to that age where he was going to age out of foster care, it's like, well, what do we do? Because we're not a residential provider, and anyway, and so the option we started looking into is this shared living. So unbeknownst to many of the providers I was calling, I am an informed person. And so when I was calling to find out, I had several providers say, yeah, you do this, and then we're going to pay you this much a month. And I did the quick math, and I'm like, you're keeping 40% admin costs. That's bull. And so anyway, so Tarp really is the only provider that keeps 20% or less that I called about with the shared living. I didn't call every single one of them. I just called you because to do shared living, you can use any provider that's affiliated with your CDBO. So like there are service providers that are affiliated in Shawnee County, the Shawnee County CDBO. There are Shawnee County providers who are affiliated with Johnson County. So you can use any. So I'm just saying. So anyway, but yeah.
And the shared living is when there's a family that wants to open their home to provide those services.
Yeah.
And then that family also, the host family or
Yeah.
per se, if they're getting paid to do that, that doesn't get income taxed because of its Medicaid funding. So you don't have to pay federal Medicaid taxes, right?
Yeah, you don't get taxed on it because they live in your home and there's something in the rules about
From 2014.
caretaking. If you're a caretaker to somebody that lives in your home, then whatever money you get for that.
So that's the other bonus for becoming a head host family.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a nice way to say it. I used to kind of, it's a horrible analogy somebody pointed out to me once, but I used to say it's kind of like adult foster care for people with IDD. And they're like, don't say that, foster care in Kansas. Which I'm like, okay, that's fair.
But it's the same idea.
It is the same
idea,
concept.
same model.
Yeah, it is. The huge difference, and this is what when I do my advocacy work with our foster care system, is Jesse was the best placement we ever had. And the reason was because of the relationship that we were able to have with his family. It wasn't adversarial because they wanted help. And we knew at any time if things changed for their life and they want to take them home, that's cool. And still, like to this day, like they're kind of my extended family, really. I always tell people like his aunt was one of the first 5 people I called when I found out I had breast cancer. And so we just we merged. We do holiday, we blend. We do, birthdays together and things like that. So it is a really nice setup for families and, not every.
And Jesse benefits the most out of everybody.
Yeah, I have to tell you guys because I've been thinking about it since yesterday. So yesterday I had to bring Jesse to KU. He had a procedure he had to be sedated for. And they're gonna have one today. Well, Dan can only take off so many days of work because they kind of like to have him there. And Jesse, I was like, I can take him by myself. I got this. But I will tell you, when we took Jesse when he was 16, it took both of us. It took PRN medication. It took so much to get him to walk through the door of a doctor without somebody potentially getting choked. Or him just sitting on the ground and not doing it. And like, yesterday, I sent him videos, like, he was in
No.
the bed, laughing, giggling, and I'm like, who are you, kid? Anyway, so, yeah, it's pretty cool, and he does, I mean, he.
No.
He does it? No, it's a lie, it's all a lie, it's not a lie. Well, I have video proof, kid. So, anyway, so, yeah, there is definitely a benefit to that, so. Jacob's favorite word's no, in case you want to know. Ask him if he likes ice cream. No.
And I think that's
And mom,
every
he
kid's
doesn't like
favorite.
mom either.
Right.
No.
Never. So anyway, what other, you guys got good questions? What other questions?
I don't know that I have a question as much as I have a statement. I think a lot of what is driving the conversation for us in this room, like my wife has said, we have one son with behavioral issues that is not going to fit into a group home environment. And we definitely don't like the idea of institutionalizing. So there's got to be some happy medium between there that we can find where he has a form of independent living or something along those lines. Because what we've always been told since we got the diagnosis is you want to make sure that they're not living with you their whole lives, because if you pass on, then it's going to be a very hard transition. So there's just got to be a way to develop something or come together, create something that can serve that community, to me, that is falling through the cracks.
Because they don't have necessarily medical needs. I mean,
Right.
their seizures are under control. It's all about their developmental and their
Yeah.
behavior
But
issues.
there are others that do have
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
medical needs too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I hear you and I agree with you. And I think that like Dan and I have been praying about this for a while, because let me think, November of 2017, I got this grand vision. We have 20 acres behind our house, and I got this grand vision to build some buildings and to do some sort of something for complex people and people with behavioral. So that was November 2017. January 2018, I found out I had stage 3 breast cancer. Everything came to a little bit of a halt, but I'll be 4 years in NED in August. And so we have been exploring like what's out there. In fact, last June, we went on our 10-year wedding trip, and I always like to go to a beach, and I at the last minute was like, I want to go to a beach in Maine. My favorite beach in Maine, let's go to Maine. And so about February, we made the plans. Well, February, March, I was investigating what's called intentional communities. And I found this place that was in New England. And I'm like, well, New England, that's kind of broad. Where's that? So I got a hold of that lady that had spearheaded and started this intentional community, and found out that she was actually in New Hampshire, and she was about an hour and a half from where Dan and I were going to be on our anniversary trip. So we went and we toured the place and got some ideas, and basically they all lived, it was like this big community in the country, and they did a lot of the things that are on our heart to start doing. So I think it is going to be a matter of parents. This was my next slide. Parents coming up with, what is it we want to do? Like what is it that we need for our kids? And so that was my question to you guys, like, what supports and services do we feel like would make the greatest impact? And then before we talk about this, I want, in full disclosure, to ask, having worked in state government many years, know a lot of people. And some of the people I work with are in high positions at KDEX. And they know I meet with lots of parents. But I said this to them, parent groups are sacred. Something I hear in a parent group doesn't get told to you unless I get parent permission. And so they said, Kathy, if there's any way you could bring us back feedback, because we know there's a problem and we want to do something different. But if parents don't start speaking up, all they hear from are providers who are taking 40% of the money. Okay, let me say that. And so if we don't start getting our voices out there, like, this is what we need, this is what I'm scared for my son,
well, it's also that, but it's also that feeling of giving up complete control. I feel like there's kind of a disconnect in this country. If you look at other countries, the family
take
units
care
kind
of
of
each other.
stay together.
Yeah, right.
But yet, for some reason, even in the United States, I don't know was because the wealth that we had, we expected 18 years old. Yeah.
Yeah, bye-bye, good luck.
And
Yeah, it's really silly.
I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it either. Well, I would say, don't let people shame you. Like, people sometimes try that with Jacob, but I'm like, yeah, whatever. I mean, he's pretty happy, he's got a good life. You tell me where he's gonna go, he's gonna have a better life, and we can have a discussion. Now, do we try to future plan? Yes. Do we try to make sure Jacob has connections to other people? Yes. But do I think there's another place he should be right now? Absolutely not. Have I had many people say, Kathy, if it wasn't for you, he would be at KMI? Yes. And so I think, you guys have to figure out what's best for you and your son, and, if that means. Yeah, if that means he's staying with you for however long that is, you can still build those other connections and not kick him out of your house, right? I mean,
I think the challenge though is that what we're seeing that's available to us is meeting with individuals that can be somewhat independent.
Yes.
They're not the profound disability population. And what we're struggling with is a path forward to come together as a critical group to create something when we know that we can't, there's no more new licenses being provided for the Red Bull licensing.
full licensing there is, yes,
Oh.
absolutely. For shared living, it's just the shared
The
living.
shared living, okay, yeah.
There's new
shared living.
subsides, but just not new, like a licensed provider who hasn't done it in the past can't start doing it.
Okay,
But there could be new shared sites. So if, let's just say, Charlie, if you guys are like, hey, I don't know, I'll keep picking on Mosaic, I don't even know if they do it. If Mosaic is a shared life, if they do shared living, and if you're like, hey, Mosaic, we found a family and we want to work with that family, and we want to do shared living, we want Charlie to do it. Okay, they should be able to do that right now. They are working on that, and that's the other thing is, I think the state is gonna want some input about those shared living regs, and so anytime I hear about an opportunity to get input from parents, I would love to let Marty know to call, like, hey, you guys, let's tell them what we need. Because I think, to your point, there's not, your point I love, because nothing, in my opinion, happens by coincidence. And when I was asked to be the chair of the IDD council, I was in the middle of cancer treatment, and I'm like, really? Do I have time for this, or am I even gonna live, to see on the other side of this? But what I know from that role is that voice that you just spoke of is often getting silenced, and we have to bring it to the surface, because people want to talk about independent living, and you know what? Not everybody can live independently.
right.
And not everybody is going to be able to live in an independent apartment. Everybody should be able to live as independently as possible, but that doesn't mean, I think people have made some expectations of what that might look like. And the same, Casey and I talk about this a lot, like, work is important. Yes, work is important, but by God, my daughter who's 6, I don't give a criminy about work. I want to make sure I get her alive to her 21st birthday. That's what I'm focused on, is keeping her alive. And so I think for the more complex, I don't think our policymakers are hearing, because they're only hearing from other folks who are, and I think what's happened is, in our state, it has been allowed for providers to pick and choose who they'll serve. And so they are serving people that are
They're
cream of the
easier.
crop,
Easier,
like,
yeah.
well,
Yeah.
not to say they're easier, I shouldn't say it like that, but they are easier, that are, more independent, that don't take 2 staff to, oh, she's dancing back there.
Oh, because, well, we have twins, and one of us like a do-de-do, he'll do whatever you want, happy pleaser, the other one's just a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
That's the
so-
one that keeps getting kicked out.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
So is Bob Bethel the most impactful place for us to be, or what's the most impact that we can make to start being heard?
I think Bob Bethel is a start. I think just maybe trying to forge, like, I could go back and ask the state, like, just hold a parent meeting and invite parents, just directly, state to the parents, cut out the MCOs, cut out the providers, talk to parents. And I think that would be good, because then they would hear your voice directly, and I'm pretty sure I can get that. So I think that would be a start to have that here.
I guess the challenge I constantly face, and again, this is me taking off my professional hat and being more of a mom, right?
Yeah.
More of an advocate is we put our elder citizens in assisted living and supported community environments. Why can't we do that with our complex kids and create social activities and interaction and have a high quality of life for them in those environments as well? Right, and families still have a lot of say for their loved one who is elder with the care. There may be some mishaps here and there, but they are very loud voices inside of that system as well. So I don't know, I have a hard time with the whole licensing thing when the reality is we have a care crisis or a caregiving crisis going on, because a lot of the parents that are sitting in this room are gonna become disabled or die someday themselves. And where do our kids go? Well, if we don't create this happy medium, they're gonna go into the institutions, and there's only a couple. And those will be full overnight. And so I don't understand how they don't see that as a long-term issue, both from a budgetary standpoint and also a space, situation.
I will say on the elder side, there are many advocates that don't even want nursing. So
Okay.
there's
well,
that. I'm
Okay.
like, oh,
Stand corrected.
so, no, it's okay. No,
But I think
hear
about,
that
I
a
think
lot.
about Brookwood in Houston,
Yeah, that
right,
was
which is like
amazing.
model
Yeah,
environment to me for somebody like my daughter. But it's all private pay
yeah.
and it's nonprofits situation. They take no state money
Yeah.
and they have full control over how that place is run, and it's nice.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
I need to tour it in person. I'm all
I'm
game
down,
for it.
let's
go.
What you said is something that Kathy and I talked about with our vision is not having the influence of the state because they have so much sway.
Correct. Less control, the more money you take from the government. I mean, that's how that goes.
Yeah.
So why not do it more privately and find creative ways to fund it through their businesses or, I don't know.
The place in, that we visited in New England was private and public. It took both.
It took
And so,
both.
So I think that's, I think, to your point, Casey, I think we're gonna have to think creatively. Like, that's why I was excited to talk to Marta and come here, because I'm like, oh, other parents, what if you help me? Because we do have to figure out, we're in Topeka, you guys are all in Kansas City, but, could we come up with a model, and could we come up with, I told the licensing people, I was like, I'm already apologizing in advance if you start getting a lot of limited licensure applications. Just saying. So, but parents, it's a strong network, and I think of these two ladies, I know they're friends, and I'm like, I could totally see them buying a place and doing a little bit of licensure and both oversee. I mean, it is a nice option. It is a nice option for kids that don't fit into the nice little mold. And so,
So I talked to Stephanie Thorne at the Good Life the other day. And she said they're moving away from the residential full licensure model more towards the shared living, just because it's been more successful. And the reason being is the residential has to be staffed with people coming in around the clock, and it's with the caregiver crisis, it's been really tough. They do receive money through the state and also through fundraising, and she said they couldn't do it alone with just fundraising.
One or the other.
It has to be both, and she said 90% of our budget comes from the state. And so when I talked to her about trying to do it private, pay, she seemed really concerned.
yeah.
And she said that would be a really tough road to make happen.
I mean, I think trying to do things like limited licensure, or maybe there's something else, or maybe we need to figure out how to expand shared licensing. I did learn this little tidbit that residential license has always been 24-hour support. Some providers have tried to be creative and say, oh, this is an independent living house, but it's always been 24-hour support. And I think the state is starting to come down on agencies that put cameras in places to be the support.
And then they don't have staff there.
They don't have staff. And so I think that is becoming more difficult for some agencies that we're trying to make their own model that, the need of regulation. So what I think is that so that's why I think this is so important. I'd love just to brainstorm this sometime, like, what is it that our kids need, or what would be like, I talk to some families and I get this, because some families are like, man, I need a lock facility. Well, lock facilities, they're really not happening in Kansas. I mean, even at K9, they can't lock any doors. Parsons, they can't lock any doors. Even at, Osawatomie and our state hospitals are different because somebody's there under a court order, and so they are locked facilities. But what are the services we need? Do we need people who are trained in, behavior management? Do we need people trained on just communicating with somebody who's nonverbal, right? Because that causes lots of behavioral issues. Or so 'cause in my head, we kind of have two big groups of people. We have a group of people who have maybe some higher functioning mobility, like less physical needs, but maybe higher behavioral support needs. And then we have people who are complex in both areas, or have, like you said, the behavioral and developmental pieces. So I think that there needs to be some thought in how do we support those two big groups of people going forward? Is it through more limited licensure opportunities? Is it through more shared living? Is it through a whole different
I'm on mute too. She's on mute. Kathy, you're on mute. Hey, Kathy, you're on mute. Marna? Are we done?
Marna, you are on mute, so we can't hear anything.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, Sanjuka, I don't think she's gonna, we can't hear
Maybe
anything.
Marna is not there.
Well, I think it's her machine, but I don't know.
Yeah, Kathy is not near the computer, so she doesn't know. I
Yeah,
think Marna is handling
Yeah.
the computer.
I think it's her machine, yeah. Well, are we meeting next week? Tuesday?
Yes, I feel like next Tuesday, Eddie still did not send the invitation yet.
Right, I'm gonna wait for him to send it. I think he's kind of doing the, taking the lead on that. But I wanted to hear what Casey Seitz had to say, because it sounded like should be part of our discussion.
Oh, when you said that, I felt like telling you, Casey is in a part of our system. She comes. Last time she came too.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
She's already part of it. Okay, that's good.
Yes, because she said I sit in the board of the KDADS and everything, so I know.
Okay.
Yeah, so she tried to tell us that, funding is such an issue if we don't take the Medicaid, but we don't have much control. So there's the dilemma.
Well, I
What
don't
would we
think
do?
that's gonna happen. I'm gonna have to leave, so
Yeah. Marna didn't hear us, right?
I
Oh,
guess
like
not. I
that.
sent the chat in the chat. She didn't respond on the chat, although she did earlier.
I can see her hand. Hi, Marna. No, she's not
No,
there.
can't hear us.
Oh,
right,
okay.
I'm gonna-
I think we have to do. Yeah.
I'm going to leave. Let's see.
Yeah. See you on Tuesday.
Okay. See you later. All right.
Hi, Marna. Kathy is on mute, so we couldn't hear anything for the last 10 minutes. Now we can hear.
Yeah, that's what on the hill, that's what we want to do. We want to have cows and horses and chickens in a greenhouse, and anybody that can work, and then go to, you know, community and do farmers markets, and that's kind of all of our thoughts.
When you could spend able account money on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
Where, two questions, where is Brookwood?
It's in Texas.
Houston, Texas area.
So somebody would make a road trip with me, because I kind of want to
It's
go.
outside, it's not like Houston spots, nobody wants to live in Houston, it's terrible for traffic, but it's like, it's on rural grounds out in Texas.
There's a place in Texas.
Down home ranch, it's near Austin.
Oh, okay.
Seen that or?
I haven't been there, I just know of Brookwood because, I have a family down there, I'm helping, and they've been investigating it.
My neighbor's grandson, they're from there, or actually, they're from Omaha, but their son is down.
And what's it called again?
Down home ranch,
Check it out. I started Googling intentional communities, and that's how I found out about the place in New England. But for me, so sometimes when you Google about the intentional communities, they're wonderful, but they're for all people who are higher functioning. And so I'm like, nope, that ain't it. So the thing with the place in New England is there was a real nice mix of people that had some more profound needs and people who were a little higher functioning. And so that was good for me to see, because I'm like, no, look, we have high needs here. So how do we make that work? So,
And I
yeah.
like the idea of the mix too, because that, you know, because Hudson loves being around other people, not just her, you know, non-typical peers, so.
So limited licensing is good for 1 to 2
One
people,
to 2 people.
and that's like in an apartment, that could be in an apartment
Apartment,
or a house.
house.
But if there was like what if there was like multiple 2-bedroom apartments or something? 2 people per. I mean, what
That
if
would be a
somebody-
full license. So you would want to do a full license to do that. A limited license is very specific for like 1 or 2 people, you know, that you want to provide some specific sports for. But that concept of a couple people on apartments, they still, with the final rule, you still have to be a little cautious, because you can't have like a whole apartment complex that's, you know, all, you have every single room. in
So what is the rule? That there has to be a 24-hour provider or per apartment?
Yeah, I mean, residential support does mean 24-hour, making sure you provide 24-hour care for the person based on their needs.
So like, you know, one family has an apartment with 2 people in it, and they're caring for that one, and then another family has another apartment next door, they're caring for that one. There's nothing to, those are each separate
Apartments.
apartments with each limited care licenses that aren't related to each other. They just happen to be in the same community. Is there a problem with that?
I mean, I think if you were gonna try to do that, you would just wanna do, because we went back and forth, do we wanna do a limited licensure where we're limited to 1 to 2, or do you just go for it? Because it's really not that much different to do the 2 licenses. So depending on what you were, so that would almost be a little bit more like the shared living concept. This poor man back here, in case he's not.
I just wanted to ask about the funding. Is the biggest problem that the funding could go away? There's not enough funding. Truthfully, I think, well, I'm gonna plan on this and I'm gonna assume we won't get it in a couple of years. And I don't know how right or wrong that is, but you know, I know they can't have unlimited funds, but is there any concern that that's what's driving everything is the funding? Because these rules are so difficult. it sounds like they're trying to weed people out by having some of these rules.
Yeah.
As basic as they are, I've talked to parents, they have no idea how to answer some of these questionnaires.
Mm.
And so I don't know whether, whether the government doesn't really understand, as you said, the people, can your son brush his teeth? Oh, well, certainly. Well, no, I just meant every other day. No, only when, that's not the question I asked you, sir. Can he brush it? The answer is no. I finally learned that from them. So, but my question on the funding is, are you ever concerned about the funding? Because we're talking about, I saw that they're looking at, in CanCare, looking at the 3 different options that we have now. The legislature just saw this, they haven't voted on it yet, how they're gonna do something a little different. So you never know, is it the government trying to help you or is it because they have limited funds?
So as far as the people that are currently on the HCBS waiver, the funds aren't going away. The problem is the people who are on the waiting list. And so unless there's an increase in the amount of allocation given to the HCBS waivers, the IDB waiting list is growing and growing and growing. So there are some families that have been on for 5 years, so they don't qualify for any services because they're on the waiting list. And so I don't think there's a fear of the money going away for individuals who are already on the waiting list. As far as the managed care organizations, CanCare, that's a whole other thing, which I'm being recorded, so I'm just gonna be nice. That was, how many ever years ago, was the state's way of trying to save money by getting 3 private entities to help oversee the services to try to reduce costs. I'm just not gonna say anything else about that. They do
It was
change,
a
like,
big fat failure, I'll say it.
Well, yeah, if they didn't save money, that's pretty obvious.
well, they have saved money, and they have saved money by cutting people's service hours and by not providing the services they need, by not paying individuals. So when these, here we go on my tangent.
Elections have consequences.
Yep, they do. They do. And, policy, I always tell parents this, and this is my philosophy. I hope you never know what side of the fence I'm on, because that for me is the strongest thing I can do as a advocate is to, I don't care if you're Democrat, I don't care if you're Republican, I care that you're making good policy decisions that affect him and my other kids. And so I'll talk to you all day. So if you're a Republican and you make a decision that's gonna hurt him, I'm gonna be in your grill. If you're a Democrat and you make a decision that's gonna hurt him, I'm gonna be in your grill about it, because really it's just, it doesn't really matter the political affiliation necessarily, but you have to be involved with the process because policies can get changed. Like, so one of the big things going on right now in our legislature is that the Bob Bethel is heavily,
You might explain what the Bob Bethel oversight.
oh yeah, so the Bob Bethel Oversight Committee, Bob Bethel was a legislature, and it was started when CanCare came to Kansas. And this committee was supposed to oversee these 3 MCOs, the managed care organizations, to make sure that things are going smoothly, providers still got paid, that people were receiving services. So everything related to CanCare is supposed to be under this umbrella of the Bob Bethel to go if you have a concern. In the beginning, providers were there all the time because they weren't getting, paid, and families go often to say, hey, you need to raise some of these rates so we can get people, or whatever the issue. I've testified on rates for nursing. I've testified on rates for kids on the DD waiver for just personal care. I've testified about the lack of sedation dentistry for people who need that kind of issue. So Bob Bethel is anything related to CanCare that's not going right is a good place to go and testify about what's going badly. And that can be about provider capacity or not having enough providers that are serving individuals with complex developmental or behavioral issues.
And that's quarterly,
It is typically quarterly. Yes.
and it's recorded, so you can,
It is
you can
recorded.
attend, and you can
Yeah.
even email to sign up to be virtual to give your testimony.
Yes, and they actually, April 20th is the next meeting, and we have until April 14th to let them know you want to testify and to get your testimony in. So if anybody's interested, I can give you the contact info of who to let know that you want to testify. You can do it virtually. I think it's the 14th. I can double check, but I'm pretty sure it's the 14th.
That sounds like it's usually what it's for.
Yeah, and so this month, in April, it's only a 1 day. Typically, it's a 2-day meeting with 1 day being open for parents, people, individuals, private citizens, is what they call it. Private citizens, agencies, anybody. They like have this hour-and-a-half window that people can testify about concerns they have. So, good question. Please said something. I'll circle back and. Oh, I was gonna tell you, sir. One of the things going on right now, so, in my opinion, this is my opinion recording. And I'm allowed to have them. In my opinion, privatizing Medicaid was a horrible idea. Because you have for-profit companies that are managing all of this care, right? And so, the only, in my opinion, the only kind of saving grace about that is that they are competitively bid out. And so right now there is talk in our legislature, and I'd have to go look at my email because it's been like a bouncing ball the past week. There is a proposal that would not allow, that would basically prohibit the state from bidding those out for 2 years, that they would just stay status quo. And there's a lot of people like me that are freaking out because if those 3 providers know they have no competition for 2 years, heaven help our families, because they can just do whatever they want for 2 years without any consequence. That's my opinion, Cameron. Anyway, so there is that. So they do, I mean, just like any state contract, they're supposed to be competitively bid every 3 to 5 years. Those contracts with the MCOs are no different. The reason why we had Amerigroup when they first started, and the Amerigroup when they did their first rounds of renegotiation, Amerigroup, their bids didn't make it. Because, and they had a lot of complaints from various providers and people about the services. So, I mean, it was good to know that the state would get rid of someone if they're not doing their due diligence. But, I mean, but the thing with that is, and I said this person at the state today, I said that the thing is that the state, the people high up in the state, who do they hear from? They hear from the MCOs. They hear from the providers who will say, whatever, you know, so like for my daughter, who we struggle to get nursing care with, we haven't had night nursing since January, and basically half of our nursing hours that are approved are not covered. And so we've been talking about that. Well, what the agency hears and what's really happening are not the same story. I'm like, no, I don't know what they just did with their numbers and funny business there, but that's not what's really happening. Anyway, so if families aren't engaged in talking to people, then they think everything's going hunky-dory with KanCare. That's why Bob Bethel is important, because somebody made a comment at one of the meetings I was in that, oh, KanCare must be going okay because it's not on the front page of the newspaper like it was when it started. And I thought, maybe we just need to get it back on the front page of the newspaper. So
I would also say that in addition to Bob Bethel, you need to be contacting your local legislators. Not all of your legislators are on the oversight committee. There are very few. It's a joint committee. So it's made up of the House and the Senate. So very few members. And make sure that you're interacting with your state representative, your state senator, in addition to that committee. Because if 20 people are talking to a state legislator sharing their story, your state legislator is going to be like, whoa, and they'll go talk to somebody who's on the joint committee.
Yeah.
So it's not just a matter of going and testifying before that committee, but developing a relationship with your legislators and making sure they know your personal story.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, totally. That's
Miss Davis on this?
yeah, we do tomorrow, 11:45. There's gonna be a bunch of us here. So yeah, I mean, and I think, you know, local and at the federal level as well. Like we, Casey and I just were able to participate in what's called a disability policy seminar at the federal level, and we had virtual Hill visits, and we met with Moran and Marshall and Representative Mann, and we meet with David's tomorrow. So just letting them hear the stories, and you know, I like Jacob has gone with me many times to testify at Bob Bethel or other committees, but there is some benefit, I guess. And also testifying virtually, so I've heard, because the past 2 times at Bob Bethel, I haven't been able to go because, shocker, guess what? I don't have a nurse for my baby. And so I've had to do it at home. And so they actually, because I go and I say, her room is like a mini ICU, okay? But but when I'm there and she's behind me and her beeper's going off and this is going off and I'm like, excuse me while I suction her, that's real life to us without a nurse. And I think that helps to show the story or for them to really see like, oh yeah, okay, that's real life.
So would Church of the Resurrection write to the legislator and ask them to come to one of these meetings? Or to hold a
Ooh,
forum?
Oh, I like that idea.
yeah,
It's not, if we invite them, that means nothing. But if
Yeah.
Adam Hamilton, the pastor of Church of the Resurrection, writes the legislator and asks them to come and hear from special needs people, parents, would it happen?
Or how
It's-
about Adam and Ann?
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, just let us know who we need to write to.
Whoever your person is, like
Yeah.
who's your representative.
Yeah, it would be very effective, I think, if you asked your individual legislator to come to one of these parent meetings.
Mm.
And if
Don't
they're,
forget about me in Topeka. I want to be included with y'all.
if they're worth their salt, they'll at least consider it
Yeah.
now.
Or send an intern?
Oh, they have it.
But also, talking to the legislature is important. That's for sure, because they hold the purse strings. But I will also emphasize talking to the head of the state departments that can and do influence the policies is very critical.
You gotta have those.
You got it. Yeah, because like I did a training for some folks about testifying with Bob Bethel. And one thing I learned is that you've got to assume that these legislators, they know nothing about what you're talking about. Nothing, not one thing. Some of them don't even know what a PCA was. Some of them don't know what a home and community-based service. I mean, they don't necessarily know what we're talking about. And so, however, the state policymakers, they do, and they do know what the policies are. And so I think it's a mix of both, because you need the policy people to help influence the policies, and you need the purse holders to help give the money to help change.
Well, it's like kind of like what we've talked in the past too. I mean, the reason there's a shortage of PCA workers and nurses in our state is twofold. It's money from the top, but it's also getting the money from the agencies to the
Yes.
actual people that are giving the care.
Mm.
That is where it's sticking. So
Mm.
even though we get a whole bunch more funding, doesn't
Yeah.
mean it solves the problem at the bottom.
Yeah.
So it's a lack of service providers, a lack of well-paid, positions at the
Mm.
ground level, if you will, as much as it is the funding. This whole, sorry, I've really seen in action how trickle down does not work here
Mm.
at all.
Yeah. What Care created was a lack of any sort of oversight and accountability, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because I have testified about this. It's like, who's on first? So we don't have nurses for my daughter. So I complain to the provider, like, find me nurses. Oh, sorry, we can't find any nurses. Okay, so I go to my MCO. Oh, well, sorry, there's just no nurses. So then I go to the state. Well, KDHE actually is in charge of the MCO contracts. KDADS is in charge of programmatic. And so it's like running around in a circle, like, well, who's on first? Like, who really can hold these folks accountable for not providing the services? Because by their contracts, they are liable to provide the services on the plan of care, but they're not doing it. So who's holding them liable? KDHE, KDADS, that's right now really not a lot. So.
Well, right now, there's $1 billion surplus. Why are there waiting lists at all?
How are waiting lists federally even legal?
Right.
They're not.
Agree. But I mean, I totally 100% agree. But then on my other hat, I'm like, that's fine, but if we take off 9,000 people or 5,000 people from the waiting list, and the people on the waiting list can't even get the services, then what? Like, and nobody has any services. And so, I mean, it's a fine dance to figure out how do you increase capacity? How do we get more licensed providers or whatever that's gonna look like to provide services? How do we get people trained? So, what'd she say?
I said, oh, if they would just, Kansas would just legalize pot, everyone would be happy.
Colorado
I
used
like
their,
that table back there.
Colorado used their revenue to reduce their wait, to eliminate the waiting.
Hey, I'm Bob Bell's meeting on 420. So. I had to, that was funny. Like,
Perfect.
Oh, that wasn't for me, by the way. I just wanted to clarify that.
Sure.
Yes, it is.
So I guess my question for maybe the group is, I mean, what do we do? Where do we start? How do we organize? What are next steps? Because I know Eddie's been kind of leading some of the parents here in discussions. Dana and I have had our own separate conversations with families. You and I have had conversations. The DD Council's having conversations. Like, what are we organized?
I think all,
Okay,
all
no,
groups
no.
in discussion would benefit from a model to work from.
Yeah.
I think developing that model and what does it look like as a shared community.
Well, and I think before developing a model, I think answering that question about what is it? What do we need? What kind of supports and services do we need? So to me, that's the next step, is to brainstorm. What does that look like? And then, you know, of that, is there anything that we have that currently would meet these needs and we just need more? Or is there a whole different licensing structure or model we need? It is difficult, like if I want to go see the place in Texas, but if it is truly privately funded 100%, like I mean, miracles are possible, but I'm just like, how do you replicate that? And when you, that's not the paradigm we live in. Like we would have to probably, like your person that did life said, I mean, it would probably, reality probably would be the money from the waiver, so, and then maybe a mix, you know, but what does that look like? And I mean, I can reach back out to my, I don't know why, I can't remember her name, in New England, reach back out to her, the Farmstead, New England. Thanks, Dan, you the man. Farmstead. Anyway, so yeah. I think finding out what it is, all the things that we're wanting, like what's missing, like for you guys, what's missing to help your kiddos, and for you, what's missing, and for Casey, oh, good job. See you in a minute, Jake. So anyway, so I think, you know, kind of.
So TART came from parent, I'll call it parent uprising, right?
Yeah, a lot of,
And Mission Project came from parents organizing an uprising. So what was
organizing
the
up.
beginning of that?
Well, I wasn't here that many
Okay.
years ago.
Do you know the story?
I mean, I just know parents came together. I'm not sure how they got the state level people to listen to them, but I could probably get I mean, I think how they did was just kind of like we're trying to do, and that
Starting
is
conversation.
having people at the state level who are willing to listen. And the good thing right now with some of the people at the state level at KDADS are people that have worked in the fields. They know. They're not just politicians that don't know. They know, and they're like, oh my goodness. And you know, so they worked in, some of them I've known for a long time. And we have worked in different capacities together. And so I think we do have a nice opportunity right now to talk to state folks. It is an election year. And so the only time in my history of state government work, usually there's a certain level of turnover at the top levels that happen when you go through a change in governor. It usually is not like director level and down are usually safe. I will say with the Brownback administration, that was not the case, and the cuts went real deep. And so hopefully that won't happen ever again in our history. And so I think some of the people who are there, what I'm saying is I hope they stay. That I don't think they're going to be leaving necessarily. So, anyway. But, so yeah, I think, you know, maybe brainstorming like some of those specific ideas, And then inviting some state folks to have a town hall meeting, to invite other people, not just from maybe Kansas City, but from, you know, our rural people. I can't even imagine some of the rural counties. And we live in Wakarusa, so it's south of Topeka. And so we're far enough away from Topeka that it makes a lot of issues difficult because finding help and figuring it all out is tricky. But I can't imagine rural Kansas. But I mean, I know you guys are focused on your own areas here, but I think we need to get the voice, because we're not the only families in Kansas that have complex kids. And so we need to make sure to hear all the different issues. So, and I think shared living, I mean, it is kind of a nice option, and I don't want that to go away. And that for some reason, I think, well, I get this little feeling that there are some people that are wanting to go away, and I don't know who those some people are yet. But from a family perspective, I think it's a nice opportunity. I'm gonna send you my kid. We just swap. So anyway. You guys are swapping each other. Swap. Just share.
Is that like for a bad version of white spot?
There you go. So that's what I think, Casey, is maybe getting and I agree to, like, you know, having the model, but I think really figuring out, you know, what are the needs?
What's the vision, what's the need?
Yeah, what's the vision, what do we want? Does something currently fall into that? And I think having that open conversation with the people that do the policies at the state level would be able to say, I think we would need both the programmatic and the licensing folks at that meeting, which I was able to meet with both sides before this meeting. So I was happy, and they knew I was meeting with you all. So as I said earlier, I don't talk about things to them unless people tell me it's okay. But if it is okay, what I would like to say is that parent group would like to have some sort of town hall meeting with them.
Yeah.
I love that.
Mhm.
What do you guys think about that?
Absolutely.
Send the cast started to them.
Mm.
So before we meet with them, I really would like to at least brainstorm. We could do it via Zoom session about what are the needs that we're having. What do
And
we?
we've done a little bit of that already.
So just add on that.
And then we've kind of started calling places that we know, like the Good Life, to talk to them about their model. Would they be willing to share it? What does it look like? What do they offer? You know, just asking some questions to find out what does it look like from what they're doing.
Has anybody seen or know about, I think it's called Midnight Farms?
That's part of
Yes,
Good
that's
Life.
CLO.
That's the other.
Mm,
Okay, whatever they do there, when I told somebody about what we want to do on our 20 acres, that's what they're like, it's like Midnight Farm. I was like, I've never been there, don't know what you're talking about, but
It's a cool place.
Mhm.
They have an equestrian program, but they're paying horseback riding. You used to do that there. They have a garden, they have animals. They do
Popsicle,
have one
popsicle
residential
making thing.
facility there,
Mm.
so.
I think maybe two houses on that farm. Yeah.
But it was parent
Mm.
initiated
yeah.
by an adult man that had profound autism.
Let's go visit.
Mhm.
Yeah, because that's what, kind of what we want to do up on our, because for me, I mean, obviously, my kids are more complex, developmental and physical, so I'm trying to figure out a model that would help with, because right now, like the current models, other than the institution like K9, there's not, like, the people that work there, they're not nurses, they're not, I mean, I remember working in a residential setting as a college student. And I look back now and I think, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I didn't inadvertently kill someone. That's what I was doing. Like, I'm doing G-tubes, I'm doing seizure meds, I'm doing all these things. As a person getting paid $10 an hour, you know, back then I think it was not $10 an hour, it was even less. So, yeah. So we were like, one of the things we were talking about in our calls with the federal government is, do we need to look at reclassifying the workers? So right now they're classified, I don't know how they're classified, but do we need to reclassify them into more of a medical or a higher?
Yes. Answer is yes.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, yes, we do. So anyway.
I would like to say that legislators, especially the older ones, don't
$1,000 a year nurse. Which one would you prefer for your after surgical care? Because that's the choice. We don't really get that choice. We get the $10 to $19 an hour person.
Yep.
You know? Yeah.
So, and, I mean, yeah, so, okay.
Well, just let me know who we need to invite and we'll move on with that.
Thank you, Marla.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
absolutely.
Thank you for driving.
Yeah.
I know you had a long day.
Yeah, we appreciate that. So how about I close us in prayer because I didn't open us up in prayer. I was so excited to introduce Kathy that I completely missed out on that opportunity. So let us pray. Dear God, thank you so much for this beautiful day. Thank you for the sunshine and just thank you for the new life that the planet is showing us out there during the springtime. And we this helps us get ready for Easter and just the good news that is out there for us. Thank you for this church and thank you for this ministry and just the opportunities that we have to get together as families and talk about these things that really concerns us. Thank you for Kathy and for her family who came all the way out here from Topeka to come and just hear us out and give us some advice and ideas. We just so appreciate her. Please be with us as we leave here tonight. Please help us to get home safely and just help us to enjoy the rest of the week. And we ask all of these things in your holy name. Amen. Thank you. All right. I'm going to then stop the recording here.